And we'll start the broadcast while we're waiting for the live stream to get connected. Let people log in here. And Michelle, your Chiefs are just they're nothing but nail biters.
Oh,
These
they make
how's your heart doing?
Not well. They like to make it very stressful to the very end, but hey, you can never count them out. That's for sure. You have to pay attention till the very last minute.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
We are a comeback team. That's for sure.
The cardiac Chiefs.
Yes. Yes.
Well, welcome to another QuickBooks Power Hour. Today, normally what Michelle and I do near the end of the year is we talk a lot about the year-end activities because the year-end happens every year, and we normally have like a high-level year-ending type of thing. But this time, we wanted to actually dive into one of the year-end activities and that accountants, bookkeepers, and accounting professionals will do, and we're going to be talking about fixed asset management, right? So the edge of your seat that you'll need here. This is like as exciting as sales tax, right? But we'll be talking about fixed asset management in QuickBooks, and we brought a guest to talk about that. So Michelle, introduce yourselves.
Hey, everybody. I'm Michelle Long, CPA with an MBA in Entrepreneurship, owner of Long for Success. Very glad to have you all joining us. That's enough. Go ahead, Dan.
Enough of you. Dan DeLong, owner of Dan With, worked at Intuit for nearly 18 years. Co-host today, also doing the workshop Wednesday duties over at schoolofbookkeeping.com. And today we have Ash joining us. So Ash, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Dan. Hi, everyone. Yeah, really thanks for having me on. So I've worked in lots of different bookkeeping and accounting roles over the years. I've been a member of the UK Trainer Writer Network for Intuit since 2014, training all the accountants and bookkeepers over here. I was actually somehow on the top 100 list in 2021. I'm not sure how that happened. I wrote a little book on QuickBooks at the end of last year, and I'm the co-founder of nettTracker that does all the fixed asset stuff.
Perfect. Well, thanks for joining us today because, boy, we need all the help we can get because, Michelle, you do these kind of year-end activities with calculating depreciation and those types of things with fixed assets?
I do not. That's usually under the tax purview, but it is a challenge. I mean, Dan, you and I talked about that at Scaling New Heights when we ran into Ash and met him there was, that's one area where there is a big hole is doing this kind of things. It's usually done in the tax software because there's not something in the QuickBooks realm. So very glad to have you joining us today, Ash, because this is where there's a big hole in this area.
That's a pleasure.
So a little bit about, I'm throwing the slides, people are asking in the chat to make sure where the handouts are. It's all on our website. So a little bit about the QB Power Hour. If you're just joining us for the first time, it's every other Tuesday at noon Eastern. And as I travel around the country, I am always a little challenged as to what time that actually is on the clock. But always check our website for upcoming events. One of the things I think we're starting to schedule out some of the things for the new year. I think we have some really cool topics, coming in January in the coming months. So go ahead and check the website because we'll put those there. They have a tendency to switch topics, so always take a look at the website for a topic of your that appeals to you. The slides and the PDFs are all on the resources there. And as Keith pointed out, I did not put it up to OneDrive, so I will do that by the end of the day for today. But the slides are available on the landing page for today's QB Power Hour once we have the video replay and the podcast. But the handouts are all there. A little bit of housekeeping. If you do have questions about the topic that we're talking about here today, please put them in the Q&A. That way we can capture them. If we do need to follow up, we can shoot you a quick email. Comments as you're putting them in the chat. go ahead and put them in there. If you have any comments about my haircut or the glasses I'm wearing or anything like that, that's a great place for that kind of thing. And then, of course, we always have the handouts and the webinar archive on the website. So our agenda today, we'll be talking about fixed assets in QuickBooks Desktop. Hey, we actually have a topic where we talk about desktop these days. We'll talk about the fixed asset list and the manager that's inside of QuickBooks Desktop. And then we'll talk, switch gears and go into QuickBooks Online with regards to what you can do in fixed assets there. We will soon realize that there's very little to talk about in QuickBooks Online when it comes to fixed assets. And that's why we have Ash joining us here with nettTracker, because he's come up with a solution to be able to help accounting professionals in QuickBooks Online when it comes to fixed assets. So let's launch our first poll. What version of QuickBooks are you using? So go ahead and answer that, because we like to kind of tailor the conversation to based off of the audience, of whether it's QuickBooks Online heavy or desktop or both. Okay, so I rambled on there for about good time there. Michelle, so you were saying that you don't really do the depreciation aspect of that. Any other things that you kind of shy away from with regards to the year-end activity?
Well, but going back to the fixed assets and everything, and I know you're going to be talking about the fixed asset manager and everything. And, that is one thing that with desktop, it was pretty cool. And, it was there and everything. But even then, I really didn't use it much because the tax prep software really had the good fixed asset managers in it. And a lot of times, whoever's doing the tax return would do the tax or the fixed assets along with all the depreciation schedules and everything. And because I didn't do taxes, I would always just get the depreciation from them. And they would run the depreciation schedules. And then I would just book the recurring journal entries to happen throughout the year. So I didn't take control of that. But a lot of accounting professionals do. And we were chatting in the chat room that's something that is definitely missing in QuickBooks Online. There's just nothing there. You can set up accounts, but that's it. There's a big gap there.
Yeah, that's about all we talking about when we talk about what you can do inside of QBO. And I'm so glad that I bumped into Ash to really learn about his solution, because it really is a need for that when you have QBO clients, and we'll definitely want to dive a little deeper into what he has to offer there. Yep. So let me go ahead and close out on the poll here, and if I could actually click the button, and it looks like both is 50%. That's typically our cross section here, but followed closely by QBO. All right, so let's talk about a little bit about depreciating fixed assets in QuickBooks Desktop. There is a fixed asset manager, and we'll talk a little bit about that in QuickBooks Desktop. It is available in Premier Accountant Edition. So all of you desktop ProAdvisors, you have access to that. All enterprise versions, silver, gold, and platinum, all the precious metal versions of enterprise and enterprise accountant as well. If you do download the slides, I did link to some of the Intuit support articles about that. But let's talk a little bit about the depreciating assets in QuickBooks Desktop. First thing you want to make sure you do properly is set up your company inside of QuickBooks Desktop to make sure that the tax form, the proper tax form is selected, because as the manager allows you to do, it will post to the right tax form line. So you want to make sure that your tax form is selected in your company settings, that's set up properly. And then inside of QuickBooks Desktop has a fixed asset item list, which, as you see here on the screenshot, it's a little bit different than any other type of item that you set up inside of QuickBooks, right? So the only thing you can specify here is the asset account. So we set up a Ford 350, truck. You would specify the asset account that it points to. so that when you use that item on transactions, it will affect that asset account. So typically, the only reason that you're setting up the fixed asset item is to be able to set use it in transactions for the originating transaction, whatever that happens to be. You bought the truck, you disposed of the truck. You're going to use these fixed asset items on transactions, and it'll give you a lot more detail of what you can put in there as far as the description, where it's located, if there's a purchase order number, the serial number for warranty purposes, and those types of things, and when that expires, as well as some notes. So that is available from the items or the list drop-down menu inside of QuickBooks. And then setting up your accounts is like the next step, the next thing that you want to do inside of QuickBooks. You can be as general as you want, or you can be as specific. Now, Ash, is there a best practice when it comes to setting up a chart of accounts to be general or specific, or does it depend?
Well, if we're talking about QuickBooks Online, then you need to really want to try to keep it as minimal as possible. So it seems like if in desktop you need a different category for each asset, you can end up with pages and pages of chart of account categories, which you really want to avoid. I definitely would want to avoid that. If I'm running a balance sheet report, I just want fixed assets to have, half a dozen categories maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the default chart of accounts will have these fixed assets where it's automobiles and trucks, and then the office furniture and those types of things in categories. But you can get as granular as you want inside a desktop, because of course there's no limitation on the number of accounts that you can do, but there's typically a practical limitation when it comes to seeing those final balance sheets. If it's 14 pages or not, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, within desktop, in QuickBooks Online, I know you can expand and collapse your categories. But from an accountant's point of view, because I've worked sort of on both sides of the fence, if I were connecting this to my tax preparation software, and then I've got to possibly map every chart of account code to my tax preparation software, then you end up with loads of things that you've got to check, and so less is more sometimes.
Makes sense. And then you access the fixed asset manager in QuickBooks Desktop from the company menu, or if you're using the accountant versions, it'll be under the accountant menu, but all the way down near the bottom there, managed fixed assets. And then in the slides is an article about setting up and using the fixed asset manager. But when you start the manager, the first thing it's going to say is, what do you want to do? What do you want to create? A new fixed asset manager client, or transfer from a prior fixed asset manager client, or if you're using the accountant's review, and they send you their period copy, and you're managing the fixed assets in your accountant edition, you can reconnect to the fixed asset manager client file, or you can restore a current year QuickBooks Fixed Asset Manager client file. Now, a point of note here, and I think I may have mentioned it, but it's in these articles that are referenced here, where you're transferring a prior year or restoring a current year. If you skip versions, so like typically a lot of clients do things when they have to. If they're if they let their QuickBooks Desktop version of 2020, which is about to be discontinued this coming year, and then they leap to 2023. There is a process when it comes to managing the fixed asset manager. When you're leapfrogging over different versions, you want to baby step it into the next version. And they might have taken care of that, but that used to be always the case, that if you're managing fixed assets on your version of QuickBooks Accountant Edition, and they leapfrog over years versions, there was always a challenge of reconnecting or restoring those. So it's just something to keep in mind, and that's why we keep the linking the articles so that you have the latest information there. But when you do set up a new client, first will be some of the general information about the client, and then your client dates, whatever that fiscal year or calendar year, and then the different bases. Base. What is the plural of bases? Is it
Bases.
Bases?
Bases. You just say it really fast and keep going.
Yeah, the different bases.
Bases.
Whichever one you want to utilize for depreciating the assets, they're going to be available there. And then your different default methods, whatever that happens to be. And then what you want to do with your asset synchronization options. So if you are connecting between the desktop and the fixed asset manager, automatically synchronize those every time it opens, both new and so you just have some options there, but as well as manually, you can do that as well. So this is what fixed asset manager looks like. The history of fixed asset manager is it actually is a Pro Series add-on for the tax product, and basically every year, if there's any changes to that, the tax product, they take it, code for code, right, and just put it into QuickBooks. So there really isn't, much to update or concern with, as long as you're using that version of QuickBooks. It has the right version of the fixed asset manager, the tax year's version of fixed asset manager. But this is what it looks like. At the top is the general asset information. And then down at the bottom is your basis of depreciation. So anything that is synchronized between the desktop and QuickBooks Desktop and Fixed Asset Manager will flow in here, as long as you're using your fixed asset items, or at least just those accounts are mapped, because then you have the option to use the fixed asset manager to calculate the depreciation from the file menu, or from one of the menus inside of fixed asset manager will be the option to assign your general ledger accounts to assets, and it's really just your asset mapping for each of those. So inside of the asset itself, you'll be able to be as specific or general as you may have already set up on your chart of accounts. So that's why it's important to set up your chart of accounts properly first before connecting to the fixed asset manager. And then there's a support article as well, because this really hasn't changed from year to year, as far as how you use it and work with it. But then when it comes time to your year-end activities, then you would just have this QuickBooks option at the top of your fixed asset manager, and you choose the post journal entries to QuickBooks. And then based off of the basis that you specified and the accounts that you've mapped, it will come up with a dollar amount based off of that depreciated expense and the accumulated depreciation, and make those journal entries for you. That is the goal. Right. And from my experience, and I know Landon is my colleague, and he's in the chat, it either works or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, there's a lot of unpacking, right? Because it all comes down to a lot of those things of what you've specified in the setup. So I'm going to launch another poll. So this is finding out whether you're the Ashes of the world. Do you depreciate assets? Or if you're the Michelles of the world, where I don't.
And that's what I remember, Dan, was that with FAM, and that, I always just call it FAM for short, the fixed asset manager. With FAM, if you took the time and dedication to set it up correctly, because as you saw with all those screenshots you just had in there are a lot of details and a lot of time in setting up all the assets correctly. And if the client had a lot of assets, it took a lot of time to set it up properly. If someone took the time to set it all up properly and correctly and maintain it year after year, it was wonderful. But what would happen is things would get messed up, and then it was a nightmare. And trying to debug it and fix it was a nightmare. And that's why, you know, a lot of times, a lot of clients, you know, we just didn't use it for, you know, and we would turn to the tax prep depreciation schedules, you know, because they have to maintain them for tax purposes. Whereas on the accounting side, it was easy to just turn to the tax people and say, hey, can we get the depreciation from you all? It was just easier. So
yeah, and that's what I'm seeing here in the poll here, is that a lot of people will do it. There's a lot of Ashes of the world there in our audience today. Yeah, do it all, soup to nuts. Or, you know, in what you just said there is I just enter the journal entries that the tax accountant tells me to, and then just post those appropriately. So I did stop sharing.
One of the things that
kind of turn. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the things that is important, I think, for us as the accounting professionals, if we're not doing the taxes or whatever, we have the closer relationship sometimes, not always, where we can talk to the client about what did you purchase? Or, you know, a lot of times if we say, hey, did you dispose of any asset? The client thinks of, well, did we sell anything? But, you know, did anything get damaged or destroyed or put out of business or whatever? We can help uncover some of that, you know, maybe a little easier sometimes to pass that information along to the tax person. So we can help with some of that aspect of things too.
Good point. Good point. So let's kind of turn things over to Ash, because he's going to talk us through the you know, the finer points of QuickBooks Online, and when it comes to fixed assets.
Cool, thanks, Dan. I'm just checking you can see my screen okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, so I mean, I've done lots of QuickBooks training, used QuickBooks Online for a long time, and yeah, I worked in accountancy practice, and one of the things I always had to do was fixed asset schedules at the end of every year, and it's a repetitive task, you know, looking at spreadsheets, copying data from one year to another, and then bringing in what's happened in this current year, calculating the depreciation. And I basically wanted to get rid of having to do it at all, so that the software can pretty much automate as much as possible, and at the same time try and make it as easy to use as possible, because well, if anything's complicated, then no one wants to do it, basically. So if we're just looking at what we do in QuickBooks Online at the moment, as you said earlier, there isn't very much you can do apart from create chart of account categories, possibly for all of your assets. That, you know, as we've mentioned, you know, you can end up with stacks and stacks of chart of account categories. You might possibly, I've heard of people that might use the products and services even to try to create a fixed asset within there, but that doesn't really create any journal entries for you. That's just going to give you a list, possibly. So QuickBooks Online on its own for fixed assets, there's not a lot you can do. So if I just come on to so this is the dashboard of a file that's already set up on the slide, and I haven't put loads of slides together, but how it works essentially is that when you connect QuickBooks Online to nettTracker, it will take you through some steps of what you need to do. And one of them is, you know, what asset groups are you using? Plant and machinery, computer software, fixtures and fittings. So if you've got those different asset groups, then you choose what chart of account codes are you using back in QuickBooks Online. So again, we want to try to keep them as minimal as possible. So you might only have the three for where the costs are purchased: plant machinery, fixture and fittings, computer equipment. You might have one code for accumulated depreciation, and you can map those chart of account categories to the asset groups that we've set up in nettTracker. And what that would do is that if we purchase a new asset, so if I've created a supplier bill or an expense in QuickBooks, nettTracker will detect that as a new asset that you've purchased. And based upon the settings, you can actually automatically go onto your asset register. And based on your settings as well, if you put a default depreciation rule for a particular asset group, it will automatically apply that rule, and it can start, calculating the monthly depreciation, and it will start posting that depreciation every month. So it's not just a year-end adjustment, it's something that will happen every month. Because if you are a large business and you perhaps need to report to the directors each month, or perhaps you've got a large overdraft facility and you need to report to the bank every month, for management account purposes, you really want your accounts to be, fully up to date and not just have these large adjustments at the end of the year. So when you have
now, I got something to add here, Ash. Now, for the astute members of our audience listening to your accent, and those that are seeing the screenshot of the pound, one would assume you're not in the United States. Does nettTracker, is it only for one particular region, or is it global?
It's completely global. So actually, the majority of our customers are based in the US. The second largest customer base are in Canada. We've got users in South Africa, in New Zealand, Australia, pretty much anywhere where there is a QuickBooks Online subscription, somebody can use the software. And if you're based in the US, then you'll have a dollar sign, not a pound sign. And our dates are, so our dates are day, month, year. When you're in the US, you'll have the month, day, year instead. Because I always have to think about that. I get asked it quite a bit. So based upon the sort of mappings that you've got in place, so here's an example of transactions. So you don't have to have everything fully automated. You can log into nettTracker and use it as and when. So if I had, like on that example, if I had created a supplier bill or an expense and I'd put it to fixtures and fittings and purchased some desks and equipment, the nettTracker will identify that as a purchase coded to your fixed asset category. And I would simply click on the pending option, and that would automatically add that to my fixed asset register. If I had it in the settings, I can choose to automatically add, and I can set a threshold. So don't add anything to the asset register if it's less than $2,000, for example, if that's your sort of limit that you put into place. And that's what the fixed asset register pretty much looks like. You'll have a section for each of your asset groups. So there I've got computer equipment, motor vehicles, and office furniture. So I'll have the description of each asset. I can use class tracking in nettTracker. The location is the text field. So currently it's not linked to the locations in QuickBooks, but the class is. So if you are using class in QuickBooks Online, the journals will be adjusted by class as well as your account category. So you can see the asset when it was purchased, the cost that was brought forward in this financial year, what the purchases are in the current year, what the depreciation has been charged for in the current year, what was brought forward from the previous year. You can see your net book value. You can set a salvage value. So if you don't want the value or the asset to depreciate below a set value, you just add your salvage value in there, and it will just keep going down until you've got your set value there. Any questions at all on that asset register screen? All good at the moment?
No, I think we're good to continue. I think what is noteworthy here is that you really understood the problem because you lived it, and this is a solution that you built a better mousetrap for yourself, and now it's it's available for other people to use too. So, but you really understand. I mean, clearly, in the 10 minutes you've been talking, the challenges that accountants face with basically with QuickBooks Online, that nothing exists to help people. This actually does, and it does a lot more than just the fixed asset managing component of that, right?
Yeah. Well, in this particular screen, I mean, this is just for like the one for the 1 year here. Now there's a full year end process, and I won't go all through that. But there you can sort of see on my screen, there's a little yellow box. That would be a calendar box. So if you've been using nettTracker for more than 1 year, you could go back and look at what is the fixed asset register for the previous year. So when you run through the year end process, it will roll all the figures forward for you. As it should. So just like I used to do on an Excel spreadsheet, but everything gets fully automated. If I'm looking at the depreciation, so as we add our assets, it will start calculating what the depreciation should be on every month, depending on the rule that I have in place. So where it's in green, it would mean that the asset has had the journal posted into QuickBooks Online, and where it's in blue, it means that I've not reached those month ends yet, so the journals haven't actually been posted. And you can actually download that into Excel as well. If you're sort of working on budgets and you want to see what is your depreciation charge going to be every month for this financial year, you can download that quite easily.
A couple questions that popped up here. Does it have to be connected to a QuickBooks Online subscription, or can it be used as a standalone?
You can use it completely. You can use it completely standalone. So we do have a few customers that actually use QuickBooks Desktop, and we don't connect to QuickBooks Desktop, but they quite like using our asset manager, if you like, and they'll add the assets manually, or you can actually import the assets through a CSV file. So when you actually use nettTracker from the beginning of a financial year, if you've been using assets on a spreadsheet for the last 3 or 4 years, and you've got your net book values and your original cost and your accumulated depreciation as per the end of your last financial year, you put it into into our template, and you can import all the values, and you can actually do that. So if you're a desktop user and you just think, well, I'll run a report and see all of the assets that I purchased this year, you could then copy those into Excel and import them.
Like if you're having a difficulty bringing in or connecting the fixed asset manager because they skipped years or something like that, you just want to say, well, I'm done with you, fixed asset manager. I want to use this instead. You have an option for that as well.
Yeah, the options there. That was my last. I mean, I can actually go into if we have time, I can go into product. If anyone's got any questions, I can actually open it up live.
Okay, let's save the demo for the very end. So let's launch this next poll question. Do you calculate and create prepaid income and expenses? So things like what would be the example here, Ash, for those types of things?
So a very common one is someone might pay their insurance on an annual basis. So they'll have one insurance bill and they'll go and they'll pay a year's worth in. So someone should put something Jonathan's put in straight away. Must have been thinking the same thing. You've got a year's worth of insurance and you want to spread it over 12 months. Perhaps you've subscribed to an annual maintenance contract and you have to pay that 12 months in advance. So all of a sudden you've got a year's worth that might have gone straight into the profit and loss, and now you've got to spread it over 12 months. And if you're doing that manually or trying to keep a track on the adjustments that you need to make, it can be painful. And from an accountant's point of view, if someone's made adjustments and those adjustments are sitting on the balance sheet, then you might look at your balance sheet in online and you think, what does that value? There's a lot of value in there that says prepayments or prepaid insurance, but all you see if you look at the detailed report is just lists of entries or journal entries, and you don't actually know whether it relates to this year or last year. So it's it can take some unraveling.
We do have a couple, or let me go ahead and just end the poll here. So looking at the most people do, about 71% still running these prepaid expense or journal entries.
And we have
so let's continue on and go ahead.
Can we ask a question? Shirley had a question. Can you adjust the prior year once you have started a new tax year? So let's say you realize you had a mistake in a prior year. Can you adjust a prior year once you've already started a new tax year?
So it's a very good question, and it's something. So currently the answer to that is no. What you can do, so if I brought forward assets from 2021 and now I'm there in 2022 and I needed to make a change, what we have the ability to do is you can delete an asset out, and you could add it back manually with what the cost and what the depreciation should have been, and you can make a manual adjustment for that. So there is a workaround. We are actually investigating ways in which we can sort of perhaps change our year-end process. That's something that requires quite a lot of thought on our part, because we sort of kept it strict for a reason, to stop people from changing the year end, thinking that once the accounts have been filed, we don't want anything to be changed. But now we are discovering some people like to roll the year forward, perhaps before the accounts have been filed. So perhaps we need to sort of relax it a little bit and just change the way some of the features work. But that's on our to-do list.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And then Rich just asked, what happens if you pay for a machine in 2022, but it's not going into service until 2023?
Excellent one. So we have a feature for that where you can tick a box to say defer depreciation, and then you can go back as and when you're ready. You can click a button to start the depreciation, or if you know for a fact when that depreciation is to start, so you think, well, actually I'm paying for it now, but it's going to be installed on the 15th of February 2023, then you could say, well, that's the depreciation start date, and it will start rolling from that time.
Great. Let's continue on into some of the other features of nettTracker.
Yeah, cool. So in March, we released the prepayments in the accruals feature. Again, just to really monitor all the adjustments that we make, to make those journal adjustments happen for us, and at the same time to keep a hold of statements, very much like a fixed asset register, that will list the balance of the adjustments made, and those balances should agree back to the balance sheet. So if I just take a look at a couple of slides that I've got for this. So at the bottom of the dashboard, I will have a summary of prepaid expenses, accrued expenses. I've got accrued income. I could have one there for deferred income as well. And that tells me, just from that screen, that's the current balance on my statement that says I've got £17,000 worth of prepaid expenses. And that is the value of that particular account back in the balance sheet. So those two accounts should always be in line. And if I'm looking at that particular account for prepaid expenses, so this one shows me that I did have prepaid magazine subscriptions, and I had some insurance that was originally prepaid. They've been fully released, from the balance sheet back to the profit and loss, so they're marked as complete. Whereas below that, I've got an annual subscription and another annual insurance charge where that was the original cost of 50,000, where I've been invoiced in one hit, and now I am releasing that back to the profit and loss on a monthly charge. How much has been released so far? What is left to be released back to the profit and loss? So whatever is in this prepayment balance adds up to my total balance of prepayments, and that agrees back to the balance sheet. And I can do the same with accrual. So it's not as common now, but a few years ago when I worked for an accounting firm, quite often they would charge their accountancy fee just on an annual basis. So they'd prepare the accounts, they would charge once the job had been done. Many people charge monthly now. Now, what you can do, you could create an accounting accrual. So if you think, well, actually, I know my accountant is going to charge me, $3,000 at the end of the year, I could put an accrual in at the beginning of the year that will start accruing what that likely fee is going to be. So every month it's going to put $250 into the profit and loss. It will go into the balance sheet. And when it gets to the end of the year, there'll be an accrual sitting in there for $3,000. I can then choose when that charge hits the profit and loss to release it, so that I won't get that 3,000 charge in 1 month. It will release it automatically for me, do all of the journal entries that I need nettTracker to do. And if I look at this little forecast, so just like I have a depreciation forecast, I've got a forecast of the entries that my prepayments have made, so that I can see every month what journals have happened in the green. In this example, the original cost was put directly to the profit and loss. So now I took it out of the profit and loss with a few clicks, and now it's been released back. And the same with that large insurance one. If you have posted something directly to the balance sheet for prepayments, then there's a tick box that we can add, as you put the prepayment on, so it will only do the one journal adjustment. I think that might be my last little slide on that one. Yeah. So
perfect. So questions that have been popping up here. Can you do quarterly adjustments, or is it just only annual or monthly?
So the adjustments are only set monthly. So you create either your fixed asset or your prepayment, and it will do the adjustments always on a monthly basis. We are currently looking at possible options of changing it, but to be honest, if you're doing quarterly management reports, it's just 3 months worth, so it doesn't make too much difference. Any other questions? I could see the accruals and the fixed asset register. It's all under one subscription, so there's no additional charge for the accruals feature. It's all within one.
Yeah, Lawrence asked, is there any planned ability to export this to PTO, which would be pro? I think he's talking Pro Tax Online.
Yeah,
ProConnect Tax
Online. Yeah.
Not paid time off.
No, not at the moment. So we don't have any current plans to, but it's something that we could possibly consider if we had enough enough requests. We might look at it.
And the thing with that, because as I was thinking about that, if you don't have a direct connection to ProConnect Tax Online, if they are using QuickBooks Online, QBO does go to ProConnect Tax Online. So to the extent that they could take nettTracker and post it to QBO, then from QBO they can go to PTO.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well. Yeah, like if you're bringing it to QBO, then it has a direct connection. Export to ProConnect Tax Online.
Yeah.
But since somebody mentioned PTO and you have accrued expenses, does this work for accrued salaries? Because I know that's a common question when it comes to because payroll is all cash basis, right? It doesn't affect the balance sheet or anything until you actually run the paycheck. But you've got the pay period. Does this work for that, or is it different for accrued expenses?
You can pretty much accrue anything you like. So in that example that you mentioned there, Dan, although I pretty much wound down my bookkeeping practice, so I had my own bookkeeping practice for probably about 10 years, but there's still one company that I still help out because I've been working with them for years, and I've got nettTracker set up with them, and they pay commissions to their sales team usually every quarter. So that means that can possibly distort one of the months because there's a huge commission payment that goes out in one quarter. But what I would do to smooth out my management reporting is that I would create an accrual based upon what I've paid them in 3 months' time, and that will then feed into the profit and loss for commission due for those 3 months prior.
Got it. Let's see some other questions here. A little bit about the subscription cost. You want to talk a little bit about how what your pricing model is?
Yeah, so this is the pricing model is it's fixed at so if you're just one company, so we have, in fact, the majority of our users are accountants in industry, so they just work for one company. So if you just got one company, then the charge is £15 a month. There's no limit on users, so it's unlimited amount of users, and there's no limit on the number of assets that go in. If you then, where it benefits accountants, bookkeepers, if you then add your second company, the second company is an extra £2.50. All of our pricing currently is just in pounds, but with the exchange rate as it is at the moment, there's not a lot of difference in it. So that's probably going to be $16 perhaps, and an extra $3 for an extra company. When you get up to 10 companies, then you, so instead of the 11th company would be like an extra £2, so probably just over an extra couple of dollars for company number 11. So it's tiered. So the more companies that are added, the cost per company, on if you average it out, becomes a lot less. So we do have some large practices that have subscribed where they're basically it's cost them well under $1 a company on average, probably about 60 cents a company per month.
I know Jonathan asked, if that would be, is there's a margin for that? At 60 cents, I think that's pretty good margin that you be able to add that to your services, your suite of services inside of QBO.
Yeah, I mean, you could make a fantastic margin on it, really. Sometimes I think we probably underpriced it, but and with the fixed assets, I mean, it is possible if you're only monitoring fixed assets and you're not looking at the prepayments and the accruals, it is possible to set it up at the beginning of the year and literally walk away from it until 12 months' time, because every month the asset will go on. Every month the depreciation will be posted. So when it gets to the end of the financial year, you receive an email to say, your company's reached the end of its financial year. You ought to log in and review your assets, basically. And then once you're happy and you've checked everything, you could invite your client to look at the asset register, because you can add as many users as you'd like, or download it into Excel. Then once you're happy, you move the year end forward until you look at it again in 12 months' time.
And I may be jumping the gun a little bit, but and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were saying you're having like an all-you-can-eat version where it's unlimited clients, or is it all still based on?
Yeah, so we've not sort of published it yet. We've not published it yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But no, that's absolutely fine. But we are. We will be offering, if people sort of contact us, so the all you can eat, basically as many clients as you'd like, as many users as you'd like, and that would be an annual subscription of $1,995. So if you've if you've got sort of 300 clients, then that works out about £6 or probably $6-7 a year per client. If you've added 500, it's going to be less than that per client, because obviously it's just unlimited for the one fixed annual charge.
Great. Why don't you take us on a little tour?
Yeah, sure. I'll just make sure we've got time, haven't we? So let me just come into my bear with me. I shall just pause my screen for a second while I come out of that. Here we go. So there is my my nettTracker file. So if I look at this dashboard in this file now, I can see that I've got a balance sheet value 195,000. I've got my asset register value 115,000. So I just before we started earlier, I stuck a couple of new assets into QuickBooks. So they've come through automatically. I can choose to click pending, create the asset. I've put a class on that. So I'll just add that one in there. And most of the stuff's come through from QuickBooks. I can change very little here, really, apart from the depreciation rule that's come through. There's the option to defer depreciation if I wanted to start it at a later time. So I can just click OK to add that one, and I'll just do the same very quickly for this one. So if I were looking at my asset register and just come into motor vehicles, so there is that Tesla that I've just added at 78,000. I've not put any depreciation through. Now, if I look at my depreciation forecast, there is a Tesla that I've just purchased in this particular month, so I'm not due to run that through. Where if I look at actually the computer equipment, I'll expand that. So there is my MacBook. I purchased that. Now I coded that after I'd actually put the depreciation through to the end of October. That was purchased in September. So that's in red, indicating that it's overdue, but I could go back to the dashboard, process again to the end of the previous month. And that will just create a journal back in QuickBooks that will just update just for the asset that was missed previously. So it will bring everything back into line as it needs to.
Does it create like one big journal entry for for the depreciation, or for each individual asset it would create its own?
It creates
own journal.
one journal. So if I look at one of these ones here for the end of October. That's another one that I could put a few extra assets in, but you just get one line per asset group. So if you've got 1,000 assets and only 3 asset groups, you'll have 6 lines, because you'll have one for the balance sheet and one for the profit and loss for each asset group. So you won't get overloaded with transaction lines on your, because I know what QuickBooks doesn't like too many entries on an account, because it can slow things down if you're trying to pull off reports. I've learned that. So if I come back within my nettTracker file, so there are my prepaid expenses and my accrued expenses. So if I'm looking at that list of accrued expenses of what I've currently got sat in here, so I've got repairs to be accrued, I've got accounting fees. So they're currently active and putting adjustments through every single month. If I had received the bill for those costs, then I've got the options there to release that accrual, which will literally just create a journal to move the values back out of the balance sheet and put them to the profit and loss to offset any costs as they come through. And again, that's my, I can look at my previous years from in there. I can download all of these into Excel.
If there is a one of the questions from Chris here is, if there is a closing date password on the QuickBooks file, does it error out? Does it give you a message, or does it go through?
Great question. So currently, if I were running the depreciation to the end of October, and someone had closed that month after that, the journal at the moment will still happen, but it will date it to day's date instead of the month that it relates to. So that is something to bear in mind if someone has posted something, then also like, why does my depreciation all appear in one month? That would be why.
Got it. That's a good safety tip.
Yeah.
And can you get to the transaction from nettTracker, or is it just looking in like the audit log and look?
Yeah, it's something we are considering, but at the moment it's just you just see the line item. So if I click on an entry in nettTracker, it won't take me back into QuickBooks to look at the original posting. If I am looking at the asset register, for example, I could look at there's like a little audit trail, so I can see everything that sort of happened against a particular asset. So these are all the journal entries that have happened over time. I've got a little summary of the information of the asset as well from that particular screen. I know we're close to time, so I'll if there's any other questions. I mean, I don't have to shoot off or anything, but I know you perhaps don't want to run over. But anyone can always contact me from through the website and ask me any questions at any time, and I'll sort of get back as soon as I can.
What would be the best way for somebody to get started using nettTracker? Is there should they sign up for a trial or?
Yeah, so just coming back to those slides there. So you can create an account either if you go to app.net-tracker.com from the login page, or if you choose the option to launch an app from our website, it will take you then to the login page, and on the right of the screen there is an option there to join us, where you can sort of click join. There's also options below that to say create an account with your Intuit login, and if you're not a user at the moment, it will automatically create a user login account for you, and you just follow the on-screen instructions to create the rest of the account. You don't need to put any credit card details in at all at that point. And if anyone that's watching the webinar wants to try it out, it's completely free to trial for 10 days anyway. But watchers of this webinar, if you create a support ticket, which is easy to do from the account area or from the help area, help and support, you can put in there you need help with subscription billing, and put in there QuickBooks Power Hour trial extension. We'll extend that trial to 45 days to give you plenty of time to have a sort of a play around and a feel for how the software works.
And that covers the year end, right? Like, it takes them over to the year end if they were to do it today. Yeah,
I mean, it is possible within the 10 days. You could, if you were naughty, you could do a year's worth of accounts and not actually pay us for the software. Of course, after the trial expires, you would need to start the whole lot again, and it would scrap. But we do keep a list of who has used it before. So if someone came back and thought they'd try it and do their second year for free, that wouldn't happen.
And
don't give the coin. Don't give it away.
And Ash, I'm sure that it does this, but just to reiterate, Stacy wanted to confirm that it does calculate book and tax depreciation for the same asset.
That's a good question. At the moment, no, it doesn't. Now, what you can do, so we have some users that just use book depreciation because they're interested in the financial statements and they want to make sure their assets remain with a value. If you're coding everything to section 179 and writing the cost off completely on the asset register, it wouldn't have a value. Now, what you can do is you can use one file as the book account, if you like, and that's connected to your QuickBooks file. You could create another standalone file and monitor your tax depreciation through that, which is not connected to QuickBooks, and you could import your assets through the CSV once a year to look at what your asset purchases have been over that last year.
Gotcha. And then also, does nettTracker respect the QBO closing date password, or will it override that and post to a closed period?
Yeah, that was a great question. I think we just had a similar. If the closing date is set and we're trying to create a journal prior to the closing date, It will still post the journal, but it would post it with today's date and not a date in the previous period.
Okay, and then a very important one here. Do you have a cousin who played rugby league for the NSW Eastern Suburbs?
No, I don't. I don't have a cousin that played for the rugby league.
Okay. That was really an important question.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a great question. I'm not sure who perhaps I must look like somebody, but I've no idea who that is.
Well, I did launch the last poll question. Did you learn something new today? It looks like a lot of people, picked up some new things here today. I appreciate you answering. And Ash, it definitely was helpful to have you guide us through the things that you can do in nettTracker for a lot of accountants and bookkeepers. You're getting some rave reviews already for those that have joined us that have talked to you before. That you're very responsive. So appreciate you coming on the QB Power Hour and giving accountants and bookkeepers an option when it comes to managing some of these assets as well as accrued and deferred expenses.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Great to be on. I'll come back anytime you want to ask me anything else, not just fixed assets. I'm sure I can help with something else, maybe.
As long as it's not rugby related, I think we'll be okay.
Yeah.
Very awesome. Thank you, Ash, for sharing that with us. Very impressive.
Okay, should I stop my screen or leave that one up?
Yeah, you can stop sharing your screen. We're coming in for a landing here. We appreciate you all joining us here on the QB Power Hour, and hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Michelle, I am thankful every day that we bumped into each other at QB Connect, and also thankful that I bumped into Ash at Scaling New Heights. So we look forward to getting together at QuickBooks Connect coming up.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Thanks. Take care.